Harvest isn't easy. Long hours, heavy loads, hard miles. But the work doesn't stop when the crop comes out. At Landis, we know next year's harvest is already in the making. It starts with choosing the right seed. It builds with acreage inputs that push your crop further. And it stays sharp with Sky Scout technology that finds issues before they cost you bushels. This isn't chance, it's planning, and it's what we do together. Talk to your Landis advisor or stop at your local Landis location today. And let's get next season started.
Wie wäre es, weniger Zeit mit dem Einkauf zu verbringen und dafür mehr Zeit für deine Lieblingspodcasts zu haben? Mit dem Rewe Abholservice geht das. Bestell deinen Einkauf einfach online und hol ihn bequem und fertig gepackt im Markt ab. Natürlich ohne Mindestbestellwert. So bleibt dir mehr Zeit für die nächste Podcast-Folge oder deine Lieblingstracks. Jetzt ausprobieren auf rewe.de/shop oder in der Rewe-App. Dein Rewe Abholservice. Online bestellen, im Markt abholen.
Welcome to Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast. I'm your host, David Geiger. Today on Farm Here Daily, the World Food Prize is a time to raise awareness about the work being done to fight world hunger. This year, we see funding cuts, yet more need than ever. I speak with laureate David Beckmann about a call to action. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Here Daily. And joining me on Farm Here Daily, we are at the World Food Prize, and with me right now is David Beckmann, a World Food Prize laureate. He received the award for leading faith-based advocacy in the U.S. that was aimed at solving global hunger. And he's also a pastor that's leading a coalition of churches supporting hunger solutions and a former president for Bread for the World. David, thank you so much for joining us on Farm Here Daily, and we're going to talk to start off with a big announcement that came out today of a coalition of laureates here at the World Food Prize that are calling for more funding for agriculture development programs across the world. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, since the World Food Prize was created in 1987, we've been through a long period of progress against hunger, really dramatic progress against hunger, poverty, and disease in the developing countries. But that's really slowed down over the last few years because of COVID, increasing conflict in the world. Also, climate change is especially severe for smallhold farmers in the tropics. The climate change has been more dramatic in the tropics. And if small farmers there, if the rains don't come in time, their family won't eat for the rest of the year. So we've had a slowdown, but then this year, for the first time, we're headed toward greater hunger and poverty. We don't have the numbers yet, but the World Food Prize laureates, 28 of us signed this statement, and we live in different countries all over the world and are working with farmers in many different countries, and we see the impacts of the dramatic cutback in assistance, development assistance, humanitarian assistance from the U.S., and then some European countries and Canada have followed suit and have cut back on their aid programs. It's killing a lot of people and is certainly increasing hunger and poverty. So it's in that context that the World Food Prize laureates, people who have participated in the progress and provided some leadership in this great liberation, together we're saying we're going the wrong direction. Instead of cutting aid, we ought to double aid for humanitarian assistance and also double aid for agriculture. The point of that, so humanitarian assistance, a lot of that's food aid, so people don't starve, but also for agricultural development so they can feed themselves, feed their communities.
I definitely want to go over the funding or lack thereof that we've seen from the U.S., but I have a bunch of tangents I want to go on that front. So let's first talk about what doubling support means. Where are you guys asking that to come from? Is it governmental? Is it nonprofits? Is it private business?
Well, what the government has been doing just far outstrips what nonprofits are doing. I mean, what nonprofits are doing is really important. But often it's the U.S. government or the U.S. government working together with other governments that provide a framework in which not NGOs can do their work and have an impact. And similarly, the for-profit sector, I think it does a lot of good work all over the world, and technological development and just sustainable solutions. It's not dependent on grant funding, but our appeal is mainly to governments and to people who influence governments. That's all of us, because what's been cut back is the government assistance. In places like Gaza and Sudan, where many people now face famine and near famine conditions. That's not a place where a company's going to go and sell their wares. You need assistance on a massive scale right away, and also good assistance even in those situations helps people get on their feet and take care of themselves.
I feel that just is a good segue into a very important topic I'd just like to go over here at the World Food Prize, and that is what you just mentioned, a concerted effort to diminish the funds that we have going to support programs that help solve world hunger. And one of those programs is USAID, and that is effectively gone. That's no longer in existence at the moment, and that is a pretty huge part in buying agriculture products in the U.S. and providing support, and I think more importantly, having the expertise and logistics to effectively get food around the world, because we have an abundance of food. We produce more than everyone here can eat in this world, but we can't get it to everybody who needs it necessarily. What is filling the void? What is left, or what is that next step that you see that we are moving towards in the absence of USAID?
Well, a lot depends on President Trump and the people around him. I think right now there's disarray, actually, and this isn't the most important thing to them. So they are making some. I'm watching pretty closely. It's a little hard to know because the Office of Management and Budget in the White House has not been very transparent about what they're spending money on and what they're not. But I'm watching carefully to see what they're going to do. There's some talk of creating an America First international aid program. They put out a health policy paper, global health policy paper, and basically it says we're going to put more emphasis on working with corporations, for-profit organizations, maybe faith-based organizations, and focus more rigorously on poverty. Well, I could live with that. You can do a lot if the government is working with for-profits and faith-based agencies and focused on poverty. But it's hard to know. That was written by one staffer in the State Department, and it's come out as a government document, but it's hard to know, well, when's that going to start? The other thing, I just recently saw that a couple of the food aid programs are still operational. The McGovern-Dole program that uses U.S. food to support school feeding around the world. 97% of the school feeding is funded by the governments of developing countries. And it's become the largest safety net program in the world. But the McGovern-Dole program played a big role in building that infrastructure that's funded by other people. And its continuation is important. And I think some of that is still happening, and then also the Food for Progress program, which is basically developing markets for U.S. agricultural products. I think that's continuing. What I hope that the administration does start a program of international assistance that reflects the president's priorities. Almost anything would be better than what's happening now. It was an immediate shutdown of lots and lots of programs without much knowledge about what they were doing. A lot of people died. They cut back treatment for people with HIV/AIDS. The Bush administration, George W. Bush administration, started PEPFAR, and it's been a tremendously successful program. It saved a lot of lives, stopped the AIDS pandemic. They're on track to make it self-sustaining, to get the U.S. out of routine funding for health care. But this was just an overnight shutdown. And for my local church supports an AIDS clinic in Kampala, Uganda. And so we talked to the people who lead that program on a Zoom call. It's two women who run it. And when the president put a pause on all international aid on his first day in office, they had to lay off 30 of their 35 staff. And then the 5 remaining people worked as volunteers for several months until they were able to scrape together a little bit of money to pay those 5 salaries. Meanwhile, they continue to serve 100 people a day. 100 people a day come to the clinic asking for help with HIV/AIDS. If they go to a government hospital, first, government hospitals are bad anyway, but it's really a private business, and there's no privacy in government hospitals. And also, even among hospital staff, there's still a huge stigma about HIV/AIDS. I happened to be in South Africa in August, and the day after the president's announcement, the South African government had to lay off 5,000 trained health workers who were helping people with HIV/AIDS. So we may see a resurgence of the AIDS pandemic in Africa. What's happened is really brutal, and there's no other word for it. It's brutal and stupid. And so I hope they get their act together and put together an international cooperation program that fits with the president's priorities.
From just observing it, it definitely feels like instead of having a off-ramp that allowed things to transition or slow down, go a different direction, the tracks were just removed. The road abruptly stopped, and that's where we kind of went with food aid. And I don't think any organization is free from criticism, and I think that it's fair to say, hey, I don't like the way this group was spending money in this way, right?
Sure.
But to completely cut it off and just create this void where nothing exists seems to be a concern for me, not only because this is a huge part, as you were just talking about, of how the U.S. supports global hunger solutions, but also because there's an emphasis, even in this administration, that food security is national security. And it seems to me that they're thinking more food security in terms of the U.S. But could you speak on why food security globally is important for economic stability, national security, and beyond just, we're helping save lives, if you want to go beyond just pure compassion?
I think we learned from 9/11 that it is not smart to neglect misery in far-off places. Afghanistan was a terrible place, and we pretty much walked away from Afghanistan and allowed that to become a base for terrorists. And our neglect of it. We were engaged in Afghanistan, fought a war, and then we walked away. And the abandonment of Afghanistan had created a vacuum that was able to host and conducive to terrorism. I mean, right now what's happening is that over the last few years, extreme hunger has surged. In Gaza, Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Northeast Nigeria, and other countries, but those in particular, for the first time in a long time, there are a lot of people who are in famine or near famine conditions. That is an environment. It's conflict, wars going on, people are starving. It's easy to recruit young men to fight each other, and it's an environment that is conducive to terrorism. It's not good for our security to have a big swath of the world in extreme hunger and turmoil. It'll come back to bite us. So it's important for that perspective, and it's just also this is just one globe. It's a pretty small place nowadays. So it's not that far away for us just going back to what's happened recently, on Monday, the deputy director of the World Food Program spoke to us. The World Food Program is the largest humanitarian organization in the world. It manages and coordinates much of the international food aid program, emergency aid. And she had just come back from Sudan. She said half the population of Sudan, 24 million people, are in famine or near famine conditions. And the World Food Program has been providing emergency food to 4 million of those 24 million people. But the U.S. and some other governments have reduced their payments. So her trip there was overseeing a triage program to cut back their assistance from those 4 million people to something much smaller. She said that they also have already cut back in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is another gruesome place. We don't read about it as much, but it's maybe more gruesome. And also in Haiti, our neighbors, they've cut back on assistance. They've had to because there's no money. I think it's mainly, I'm a pastor. This is wrong. It is just wrong for the wealthiest nation in the world to say, oh, we're going to save money. And for really, what are we spending that money on? And then, so it's the wrong thing to do, but it also is going to bite us.
Do you know how much, quote unquote, money being saved by cutting USAID, what that figure looks like?
Yeah, all of U.S. assistance is about 1% of the federal budget. So it's in Washington terms, it's nickels and dimes. I shouldn't say, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's serious. But the wonderful thing about it is that if people are really poor, if a village where the average income is $250 a year, if you have some money and you can come in and help them, you can do a lot of good with not a lot of money by U.S. standards. So just for that reason, it doesn't make sense to walk away from it.
I think from what you said, folks listening could definitely infer that the people who need this food assistance need it because of very specific reasons, whether they're oppressed or they are imprisoned in camps or they have no access or there's environmental conditions. It's not a system where we are just throwing money around willy-nilly. These are going to specific areas for specific reasons. And once again, I acknowledge that there definitely can be times where there's waste or there's problems that need to be addressed. the overall concept is these are people who do not have the ability to either get their own food, make their own food, or find their own food. And that is why we're providing support. Is that correct to infer?
That's absolutely right. And the upside of it is that for 30 years now, we've made more progress against hunger, poverty, and disease in the developing countries than at any time in in global history, in human history. You know, I read the Bible, and it's like the Exodus. It's like the Exodus. It's an experience of God's love in our own history. And so it's not just. I mean, I've been talking about people with AIDS and people in Sudan, but there are other places: Ghana, Tanzania, Mozambique, Bangladesh, where people have been able to make a lot of progress, and their kids are better off, really better off. But there too, you need agricultural development assistance, other kinds of assistance to. The need is less drastic, but the opportunities are often greater to help people move ahead. And just from the point of view of Iowa and farmers here in particular, I think farmers often, and maybe people in Iowa generally, because of the agricultural connection, you know, they hear about people starving in other parts of the world and they think, why? You know, we can take care of that and do play a role in doing that. And then the other thing is the development, the rising incomes in the developing world for the last 30 years have been really good business for Iowa. I studied economics, and I sort of favor a liberal trade system. I think if it's managed properly, it can benefit everybody. But I don't think we've always managed it well. But the two interests that have clearly been served by the liberal trade order are agriculture, U.S. agriculture, and the developing countries. They've both been able to take advantage of the open economy to sell more. So I hate to see that order, those liberal trading opportunities shut down. I think we could manage them better, but don't shut them down. And the assistance and the trade together have had a lot of success. It's not just helping people climb off the ground. It's helping them soar.
I would like to know your perspective of, there is a general understanding that when you are a leader, when you are at the top of a governmental organization or any organization, you are sometimes presented no-win situations or situations where there are essentially the idea of the choice of between the lesser of two evils. How do you balance tough decisions you have to make as a leader, as a power, and compassion, principles, and ethics that you would make as an individual?
In this case, I don't think it's an issue. What's the point of, we're talking about 1% of the federal government spending. So spend it well, it's a lot of money, you have to spend it well, but it's not like it's bankrupting us or keeping us from doing any other thing we want to do. I don't quite get it, but it's not one of those questions where you have to make a big tough decision. You have to starve people because we do so little relative to the size of our nation, the size of our economy. What we do to help people around the world is not much, but it has changed the world. U.S. leadership on international development, hunger reduction, poverty reduction, has changed the world for the better. So we ought to continue it, but I don't think there's a moral dilemma for the leadership. It's just, I don't know why I can't understand what motivates it. Partly, I think, some of it, I don't know, but some of it was Elon Musk's role in the early administration. Some of the things he said were just ill-informed. And he also had this sort of tech executive idea of break things and move quickly and break things. That's how he came to the international aid program: move quickly and break it. So I hope they reconstruct it, and not wait around for another president. We need it now.
If you were someone who had the idea that USAID was wasting money, but food security is important, not necessarily that that's correct or incorrect, but if that's the direction you're going, and you mentioned that it is a smaller percentage of our GDP, is there a way then that you see we could use, as you mentioned before, maybe a private way or a nonprofit way to fill that gap, to create that as the solution, or use that as a solution to the situation? How would that look to you in the same way that the government's role was, once again, if you believe smaller government is more important to move forward on this topic?
There are a lot of things that that businesses and NGOs can do, charitable individuals can do. And actually, over the last decades, we've improved the quality of what the government does, partly by building partnerships between the government and private sector, for-profit and non-for-profit actors. We've really improved the quality of the government aid, and I think you could move further in that direction. In the USAID's agricultural development in East Africa, I know Cargill and a couple other U.S. corporations have played a role, and the U.S. government has planned its operations like to build roads and do the public sector things that need to happen for those companies. And then, of course, the Tanzanian government or the local government needs to be involved, but they've been eager to have the involvement of U.S. corporations. They don't want to be aid recipients forever. So they want to do business. So I think there are, for people who more conservative people who want to see more of that, there's scope to do more. I think really to make it work, you've got to have governments involved, and they need to provide a framework in which businesses can do their thing. And similarly with NGOs, NGOs to be effective, there's a limit to what you can do by just doing a little project someplace. What you want to do if you're running an NGO or leading or working in that way is to innovate, to develop systems, ways of doing things that can be replicated by other groups or by the government, and scaled up. So I see the way forward as I don't think you can cut back. You shouldn't cut back on government, but you can make the government work. Put more emphasis on working with private groups. That'd be great.
As a concluding thought then on this conversation, you mentioned you'd like this to happen and happen fast. Some solutions, some returning funds to global food security issues. We have a government shutdown, we have tariff challenges, we have conflicts around the world. Where would you rank this, especially being at the World Food Prize, it is an emphasis. Where would you emphasize that as what it should be on the priority list of national leaders?
Pretty high. And we don't see signs now that the administration is planning to move it very quickly. So I think next year's elections are important to send them a message that voters maybe think some things have gone too fast and the damage has been done. If they get that message, they can figure this out. They can change course. But I think it depends on voters to weigh in, maybe contact their senators now, and then next year send some new people to Congress to send a signal that that maybe things have gone too fast and too far.
David Beckmann, I could talk to you for another hour easily about this subject, but I want to be respectful for your time. David is a World Food Prize laureate. He led faith-based advocacy in the U.S. aimed at solving global hunger. That is what he received the World Food Prize Award for. He's also a pastor that leads a coalition of churches supporting hunger solutions, as well as the former president for Bread for the World. David Beckmann, thank you so much for joining us on Farm Your Daily.
Yeah, thanks for covering this.
CRM was supposed to improve customer relationships. Instead, it's shorthand for Customer Rage Machine. Your CRM can't explain why a customer's package took 5 detours? Reboot your inner peace and scream into a pillow. It's okay. On the ServiceNow AI platform, CRM stands for something better. AI agents don't just track issues, they resolve them, transforming the entire customer experience. So breathe in and breathe out. Bad CRM was then. This is ServiceNow.
This is Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast as well as our social media channels at Field Forward Pod. You can also find me on social media at Geiger Reports. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.